So really excited to be with you all this morning. Before we start, can we just give Rocket Lane a big round of applause for planning this event? It's been fantastic, but I do have one piece of feedback I'll just share openly here. I have a humble request for next year. I'd love if we did all of the sessions by the pool. It would be awesome if we could alternate between pool and hot tub. I don't know about you all, but talking about AI and professional services in a pool sounds pretty exciting. So half the room here now is like, this guy's a weirdo. I hope he's not on the planning committee for next year. So really excited to speak with you all today. My name's Gian Luis Delgado, and I serve as a member of our services leadership team here at LogicGate. LogicGate is a modern enterprise governance, risk, and compliance platform. We offer over 30 different use cases, and each of these use cases can be offered out of the box at different maturity levels. So we partner with our customers to help build and scale their GRC programs, in many cases globally. In terms of our services organization, we have grown quite a bit. We're about 30 individuals now. Started just with a mighty team of 7 a few years ago. In terms of our implementations, we run around 100, 130 active projects at one time. We're about 80% in-house, 20% are supported by our certified implementation partners. And so in terms of my background, I've had the privilege of being able to deliver over 10 million in professional services with teams across a variety of different tech solutions, business intelligence, analytics. And so as a part of all of that, I've really gotten to see a bit of kind of what enterprise software delivery looks like, and excited to talk to you a little bit about how we're doing that at LogicGate and really how we're thinking about leveraging our people. And so at LogicGate, we're really, really focused on time to value. So as you can appreciate, having so many different offerings in a holistic platform, we're not just focused on time to value, we're also really focused on quantifying that value. But that also to come through a message, right? We have to send that information to our customers. And so I'm going to start with a quick question. I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand if you prefer to hire folks on your services team from software implementation backgrounds. It could be tech consulting, people that know the SaaS customer journey. So raise your right hand for that. And then I'm going to have you raise your left hand if you prefer to hire industry subject matter experts, potentially former customers, maybe end users of your product. And then go ahead and hire both if, oh, well, hold on. I didn't tell you what both is for. Go ahead and raise both if you find that you're hiring with different criteria. So go ahead. Let's see. Let's take a show of hands. I'm going to try to look past these lights. Okay, interesting. It seems like we were pretty mixed across the board. But that, I think the reason I asked that question was you all have a point of view, right? You all are really thinking about who are the types of people you want to have within your organization. So that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, is getting the right people in the room to drive that faster time to value. So when I started my career in consulting, I actually asked myself a question: why on earth would someone pay over $200 an hour to implement a no-code software? I graduated from business school and information systems, and I was like, I don't even have to do the coding. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. But what I was overlooking was the journey that customers have to go on to realize value, particularly in large enterprise and matrixed organizations. It can be very precarious. So one of my key points here is we just heard about amazing AI features and automation. I think we're seeing a lot of opportunity to be able to automate our delivery and how we're actually driving value for our customers. But I think we can all probably appreciate, I don't know if we found a way to automate value realization and the perception of value, right? Maybe we'll have agents and buyers and sellers, but until then, I also am not familiar with the way we can automate a sale, right? So there are real things going on behind the scenes that drive, right, your sales, as well as the stickiness of your relationship, right, before renewal. So for a lot of our customers, I'm sure we find that our product features are driving a ton of value, but I think often we forget that sometimes our people can be stickier than our product. And that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about today in terms of how that influences our churn and our expansion. So this statistic here is from a KeyBank survey. So annually they survey about 100 private SaaS companies. So hopefully this isn't surprising to those in the room. This should hopefully be a good statistic for all of us. I'm going to unpack it a little bit by telling you a little bit about some of the stakeholders we work with at LogicGate. We tend to work with chief regulatory officers, policy managers, risk managers, risk analysts. Tends to be a worried bunch. Can be a little anxious. They're under high-stress situations, but I'll tell you a little bit why. So let's say you're a chief compliance officer at a mid-market bank. You oversee your anti-money laundering practice, and according to the Bank Secrecy Act, you are responsible for reporting any suspicious activity as soon as you may become aware of it, right, within your organization. Let's say someone on your team forgets to file the report, didn't take the right notes, just didn't look at their email. That chief compliance officer is facing criminal penalties, which can include jail time. So just curious, can anyone in this room raise your hand if a part of your day-to-day job faces the liability of criminal penalties? I'm looking. All right, I see one. Sorry. Okay, not many of you. So my key point here is the deep empathy these people are looking for matters, right? Their day-to-day operations are not just about efficiency and automation. There is serious risk that they are personally taking on, right? And that's a huge part of how we try to strategically manage our resources, to have an appreciation for that, right, as we deliver our onboarding and implement our platform. So again, back to that point, if you saw yourself facing jail time, right, would you trust yourself to self-implement everything, right? Would you trust your team to take a step back and not request additional advisory? I know I wouldn't. But we find that a lot of our customers are really looking for trust, right? Because it's so, it can be so high risk, right, working in the GRC space. That trust is what I believe drives the statistic, right, and leads to more expansion and less churn. So I'm going to go walk through a case study now that I think tells a really good story of that from Gainsight. Anyone from Gainsight actually here? Well, thank you, Gainsight. Whenever you see this, if you watch this recording, maybe you won't. But I love the way they told the story, which is why I wanted to pull from this. So there's really two key findings, right, that I wanted to highlight in terms of how they went from 13 weeks to 4 weeks, right, in terms of their implementation timelines. My first point is out of the box, right, your solution out of the box is not or shouldn't be just a configuration default. Out of the box is a point of view. When you are coming to your customer and you're saying, this is how we've designed our product, these are the features that we believe will help drive value for you, you are sending a message that this is a best practice, right? So customers want advisory. They want your perspective. They want your team's skills. The other key piece that we found from the study was the multiple moments of value. We've been talking a lot over the past few days with value markers and value drivers, and we'll talk a little bit about how we think about that at LogicGate. But I think fundamentally, this seems pretty simple, right? Just have a point of view, make recommendations, drive value along the customer journey. Should be simple, right? Why is this so hard? I recently saw a venture capital firm talking about time to magic. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I personally didn't really resonate too much with me, because I think if you talk to a lot of the stakeholders that we work with at LogicGate, I think you're going to find they're not looking for magic. They're looking for pragmatic recommendations that exemplify a deep empathy with a lot of what I was just talking about in terms of what it's like to work for issuing bodies, have regulatory bodies breathing down your neck, audit deadlines that come out of nowhere, right? Consultants running around your organization trying to find evidence that you're satisfying controls. That is the type of environment that we find many of our stakeholders in. And presenting software that says, oh, we'll just solve everything doesn't quite fit the bill. So recently I had a prospect who was hoping to migrate a ton of data, over 1 million pieces of GRC data. And I pushed back. I said, hey, is this actionable? What are you going to do with 1 million risks? How big is your GRC team? How big is your risk management team? So overcoming these challenges can come easily if we start to unpack the value drivers early. And the way that we do that at LogicGate is actually by bringing in our services resources into the scoping process and early into pre-sales. So talk a little bit about how we do this. We bring in our team early so that they can be able to ask those provocative questions.